All right. Yes, yes, yes. Finally. We're about to get started with the Political Soul Food podcast. Actually, the Political Soul Food Forum. um, we're going to bring down the music. We want to give thanks to DJ Twist out here, the baddest DJ on the East Coast, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure y'all holler at him. I want to thank Hexagon Lounge for hosting this first Political Soul Food Forum. My name is Kasaun Henry. I'm the moderator and host of this event here. And this event grew out of something that I have called the Political Soul Food Podcast, which is a site that I use to reflect on issues that impact the Black community in particular and the world at large. So I decided to branch out, to open up this discussion, to bring in like-minded and also otherwise-minded voices to talk about what's going on to us, particularly Black and brown people. I've learned the hard way in many ways how irresponsible it is to not be involved with politics. And I've seen how it costs lives, people that I know, family members and best friends. And this whole idea of political soul food, when we think of soul food, it's not just what you eat for Thanksgiving, but we also use it in a way to talk about food that can help us grow, albeit spiritually or intellectually, or even just having more knowledge about the world. And that's what this forum is about, getting knowledge of self and knowledge of ourselves as a collective. I've been very, 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 very fortunate to run into some important people who have played a big role in my intellectual growth. We have here two intellectual giants, two people. I like to think of them as Navy SEALs because they are actually boots on the ground trying to make a difference in our community. They have been doing this since I was a kid, and they're still doing it. So I want to introduce Jones Murphy. Let's give a shout out to Jones Murphy, please. This brother here, he is worth all of your applause. This, and we'll get into it too. This guy here is really about it for all things that is justice for the Black community. And sitting next to him, we have Jerald Times. Jerald Times is also a phenomenal mind, a brilliant person. I'm going to let them speak for themselves in a second. But I've known Jerald for quite a bit since I was a teenager, and I would put money on his brain. This guy is an encyclopedia of not just random knowledge, but knowledge that matters. And I love him as an example of someone who invests his time and energy to understand not just himself, but also our community and what happens to us. We might have some more guests coming in online. You probably see them on Zoom up on the screen. But until then, we're going to rock right now with what we have, which is more than enough to fill us. So, Jones and Jerald, thanks again for being a part of this discussion.
And Kasaun, by the way, thanks for bringing this all together. This is a much needed discussion, so really appreciate that you brought. And by the way, this guy is just want to say one thing. Jones is a PhD in physics on top of that. So I think it was important to mention that. And I've also appreciated him as a chess player as well. But yeah, well-known physicist.
Yeah, thanks. Well, you beat us to the punch. Yes. I was going to have you introduce yourself.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, that's all right. Hey, we're ready to jump in. So we're talking about abortion rights and voting rights. This is our first forum, so it may be a little rough around the edges, but we want to basically make this available to our community. But before I get into that, we're here at the Political Soul Food Forum. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jones, and what happened in your life to make you interested in being a part of events such as this?
Sure. I was born and raised in the Caribbean, came to the U.S., met Grandmaster Maurice Ashley, your chess teacher, your high school chess teacher, in college, went on to grad school at Caltech. After Caltech, I worked at AT&T Bell Labs as a research scientist, and then I made a big career change. I went on to Wall Street. at Wall Street, I worked for some of the biggest companies in the world. So I was a trader at AIG, I was a trader at Citigroup, portfolio manager and trader at Bank of America. And then after that trading career, I went on my own and started my own hedge funds, and I moved to Europe. But the 2008 crash really, messed me up. That Bush thing where the U.S. dollar collapsed by 50%, then he crashed the stock market. That forced me to start looking at other things, and I went back to something that I love a lot, which is getting towards education and working with kids that are gifted in math and science. So for example, I coach kids in the math Olympiads these days, and in the process of doing so, I'm realizing there's a lot of miseducation that's going on of our kids. They're being taught a lot of bad history. I had big fights with my kids' teachers in terms of the version of history that they taught them. So this is a very high priority issue for me.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And Jerald, the same question to you. This way we can get a little bit of a biography. What led to you in your life and all the things you've done to be even interested in having such a conversation?
I was born and raised in Harlem. Learned chess at a late age, at the age of 11. I say it's a late age because you should really learn chess by 5, 6 years old. Chess is a language like anything else. Went to school, studied classical English, majored in Shakespeare of all things. Taught writing for about 5, 6 years. While there, I met very established poets, Abiodun Oyewole from The Last Poets. Lived the life of a poetry teacher, but chess started paying the bill somewhere in the 1990s. By the way, Kasaun you were on a very powerful team in the 1990s, the Raging Rooks. That brought a lot of money inside of the hood for chess. So when they saw 4 African American scholars, front page New York Times, it set a lot of funding into the inner cities. As a result of that, I changed careers from teaching writing to teaching chess. But my goal was always to elevate young minds. I saw chess as in short, a pathway to elevation. I mean, this in short for the audience. Scholars that play chess, they're more likely to score higher on standardized tests than scholars who do not play chess. And as a result of that, they get into better schools. Because they get into better schools, they have more opportunities. But just to answer your question, Kasaun, I always had concerns about the Black community and the voting rights issues and the lack of equity, and just in general political equity that we experience in this society. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family that was very politically active. My mother was a part of PUSH, People United to Save Humanity. That was Jesse Jackson's early political campaign before he turned into the Rainbow Coalition. So I grew up in a family of politics, yeah.
Awesome. All right, thanks for sharing that. So let's dig in. Before we do, since we put in all this effort, got a fly picture of Mr. JT up there.
Can I make a
And we got Jones Murphy. Just wanted to throw that out there. Yes.
Can I make a quick comment about my friendship with Jerald?
Yeah, please.
Our friendship started out as just chess. I would see him at tournaments, and here was this brilliant young black kid just beating these super high-rated masters, international masters, whatever. And then we faced each other at the New York City Championship one time. We played each other, and he beat me in a brilliant game. I tried to scare him with some sacrifice, and he fended me off. And
but you played brilliantly, actually.
And then our relationship, we started, as we talked and interacted, we started to realize we had a lot more in common. We've just steadily grown closer and closer over the decades.
That's amazing. So we're going to jump right in now. So let me just throw up here, for those of you looking, we're going to talk about abortion rights first. We're going to spend about maybe 30 minutes having a dialogue, and then we're going to open it to anyone who wants to join in. So, yeah. Now, we had other guests, because it may seem strange, we have 3 guys up here talking about abortion rights. But our other 2 panelists, Umu Ba and Chanel Washington, are not here. Hopefully, they will jump in. But I'm sure by the end of this conversation, you will realize that abortion rights is not just an issue impacting women. It's an issue that's impacting all of us, especially by nature of the motives for abortion rights and what it extends to. So let's get into this. I have here a summary of the Dobbs case that led to the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And so Justice Alito delivered this opinion on the court. I'm going to read this first paragraph and pose a question to both Jones and Murphy. So Justice Alito delivered the opinion of the court. Abortion presents a profound moral issue on which Americans hold sharply conflicting views. Some believe fervently that a human person comes into being at conception and that abortion ends an innocent life. Others feel just as strongly that any regulation of abortion invades a woman's right to control her own body and prevents women from achieving full equality. Still, others in a third group think that abortion should be allowed under some but not all circumstances. And those within this group hold a variety of views about the particular restrictions that should be imposed. So the reason why I wanted to read this is because on the surface, it sounds like a very general concern about the complexity of abortion. And so I want to start with this. You know, I'm not gonna. You all know where I stand, but many people reading this would not see anything beyond just this apparently well-tempered statement about the concerns for voting rights. What is your take on this opinion and of those who delivered this opinion? Let's start with Jones Murphy.
I'm wearing a shirt that says science because making stuff up is not okay. And the life begins at conception is one of those made-up stories. And let me tell the facts as a scientist. Identical twins, triplets, higher multiples come from the same conception. They're not the same person. A conception is not a person. So it's not any kind of individual organism. It's actually indefinitely many organisms. It can be subdivided and cut, and each piece will develop on its own. That's not a person. You can't cut a person. We use the term individual to mean that which is indivisible, cannot be subdivided. And that simply doesn't apply to conceptions. We have one of the most ignorant, mediocre, scientifically illiterate Supreme Courts in the world today. We have people there who don't know science, don't believe in science, and constantly hand down rulings that now we're getting a flood of rulings that are anti-scientific. It's not just abortion, it's on global warming, it's on COVID. One after another, they stand against people like me. They stand against the world's and America's most gifted, talented, hardworking scientists and mathematicians. Ignorance is not bliss. It leads to all sorts of problems. And this is a triumph of white supremacist mediocrity that's going on here. And so that because of that ruling, now it's harder to get an abortion in the United States than it is in Saudi Arabia. Because of that seemingly calm, objective ruling.
Right.
We just fell behind the Middle East.
Right. I'm going to come back to you. Let's, Jerald, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so America's radically changing. I mean, I think this is rooted into the demographic changes. America is now 60-40 in the last census, 60% white, 40% people of color. The Supreme Court wanted to hand a victory to not only the white supremacists, but they wanted to hand a victory to the religious right. There is no real reason to overturn Roe versus Wade. I think there are additional concerns in regards to prenatal health care, whether you're going to give contraception. They're not supporting any of those additional facilities that would help a woman during pregnancy. So in essence, they simply want to change back the clock. They view it as a culture war. Roe versus Wade was a victory as they perceived for the West, for the left. And now, we're in this quagmire. We're fighting for the soul of America where the court is 6-3. The 5-4 court could not necessarily overturn Roe versus Wade, but when Ginsburg died, and I think Amy, she took over. Who was the last?
Coney Barrett.
Yeah, she took over. And so this 6-3 Supreme Court is not only going to overturn Roe versus Wade, but they're also going to overturn gay marriage. They're going to eviscerate voting rights. I mean, I can go on and on. So this is actually part of a much deeper plan that you were kind of hinting towards earlier.
Let's go further into that. It's funny. So I'm not going to just be the passive moderator. I'm going to chime in with y'all. I was in this debate on Facebook not too long ago, and I think this debate exposed much of what you're saying. So I got into this debate. So this one lady was saying, why you're making a big deal about this overturning of Roe v. Wade? Some of us have different opinions about abortion, and we would like to not have a law forces us to have abortion. I said, wait a minute, Roe v. Wade doesn't force you to have an abortion. What you're doing is imposing your view by limiting other people's right to have one, and as well as supporting these laws, these trigger laws in states that were never really repealed when Roe v. Wade hit. It was a federal, sort of jurisdiction, but it just suppressed the action of certain laws that restricted abortion in states. And you're supporting that. So what you're saying is force. You're not just fighting for your opportunity to live your life. You're fighting for legal means to dictate how I live based on your views. And that, when I had this conversation, when I had to articulate that to this person, I said, wait a minute, this document here is full of baloney. So I mean, there is an intentionality in these laws, particularly this the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I think, Jones, you had something on your mind to say.
Yes. Look at the international context, because when this ruling came out, there was huge international reaction. Europe, anger. Canada, anger. Australia, anger. The most advanced, civilized, closest allies the United States have, anger. But there were countries that were very happy. The Taliban were delighted. Saudi Arabia's princes were delighted. The most abusive, backward, barbaric regimes on earth came out, they were very happy with this ruling. This is the kind of company American conservatives keep. And there are some of us within our community who are very conservative and are very ignorant people, and they don't know this global context, and they don't look around the world, they don't pay attention, and they don't inform themselves to understand the backward company that they're keeping. And the hateful company that they're keeping with people who want us back in chains very badly. Because along with rolling back the clock on women's rights, there's a whole lot of other stuff they want to roll the clock back on. You're keeping a very dangerous company with some snakes. I want to make a quick comment on what Jerald said. He said the Supreme Court is 6-3 Republican. Republicans have not won the popular vote in 18 years. And that one time 18 years ago is their only popular vote win in the last 34 years. So how can they possibly be up 6-3 on the Supreme Court? The Electoral College, the Senate, which gives West Virginia, which has a population of the Bronx, equal power with California, which is 40 million people. We have a system that was built for slavery, and it's delivering the kind of results it was intended to do, which is to misrepresent the will of the people. It caused a civil war once. It's going to cause another one, and I don't think it's going to take long.
All right, you're beating us to the punch for the voting rights in another whole session. Jerald, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, when Murphy mentions here about the Civil War, the stats are beginning to show this. Malcolm Nance has a book, They Want to Kill All Americans, and as a result of the Obama presidency, white males in particular became incredibly radicalized inside the United States. We have more militia groups than ever before. And by the way, the White Citizens Council, the Ku Klux Klan, they're nothing in comparison to these new militia groups. One of the reasons why we cannot even pass gun laws inside of the United States is due to the fact that we have white supremacists both in the Senate and the Supreme Court. And they do. The main reason why is because they want these groups to have access to these guns. The point, going back, is again, America is now 60-40, 60% white, 40% people of color. In 25 years, these numbers are going to change. And they're beginning to see this, and they believe they're calling it replacement theory, the idea that people of color are going to take their jobs, are going to take political power, and perhaps they fear that we're going to do some of the things to them that they once did to us. I mean, obviously not, but this is the perception.
Right.
So they are arming themselves, right? And in this divide inside the United States, people are saying it is heading towards a possible another civil war.
I want to, y'all definitely edge me on to the next topic. Jones, there's 2 points I want to make, sticking with the abortion rights issue. One about the science and the one about this ignorance you have spoken of. But the science, what's interesting is that a lot of women are in tragic situations, health situations, because they don't have the option to get an abortion. And pregnancies they're complicated pregnancies, and doctors need to make this call early. But in states like Texas, you have to wait till like the woman is the mother's in like imminent danger, basically. And so we're seeing an uptick in deaths and also complications in pregnancies that wouldn't otherwise be had this. So this is not just, it's having real world effects, everyday effects on women. So that's something to keep in mind. And this is definitely a scientific issue. Doctors in Texas are calling the governor and mayor saying, we need to make a move now. And they're saying, nope, this is the law. And many families who, fortunately for them, have money to uproot themselves and go to another state, but not every person does have that luxury. On that note, I definitely want to talk about another discussion. Actually, it was in the same debate that I had. Oh, so it was given to me like this. Well, this is a good thing because all these abortion camps are in black communities. And it's like, no. I said, well, let's look this up. I think the number is like maybe 1 in 10 or something like this, and actually 6 in 10 in white communities. What's attached to abortion rights is actually health rights, women's health rights. And we don't have enough clinics in our community for preventative care, among many other things. And so a lot of us in the black community, black and brown community, have fallen prey to this false narrative of this predatory, strategy to kill off black babies by means of abortion. Meanwhile, the majority of these centers and health centers and Planned Parenthood centers are not even in our communities. Wow. And this goes back to, I think it kind of is on the heels of what you were alluding to earlier.
Yeah.
Have you experienced such, I would say, twisted or misguided sentiments and expressions?
Yes, a lot. And the whole pro-life term is deeply bogus, right? If you compare the states, the more people in a state say they're pro-life, the lower the life expectancy in that state. The higher the infant mortality, the higher the maternal mortality, the less healthy the population is. So the people living the shortest, sickliest lives, right, with the highest infant mortality, like in many states, higher than a lot of third world countries, are telling us that they are the ones who are most concerned about life. It's just a lie. It's nonsense. It's insulting our intelligence when they tell us this. The whole term of pro-life is just to police people, control their sexuality, and slut shame, and just be ignorant and backward. This whole, well, almost all of us have immediate relatives, loved ones who've had miscarriages. Miscarriages are very, very common. The medical process to deal with a miscarriage and make sure somebody doesn't die from after effects of it is identical to an abortion. It's identical, it's the same process. By banning abortion now, a lot of women who have miscarriages and have parts of the miscarriage still trapped inside of them are going to die. It's just gonna sit there, it's gonna get infected because it's not scraped out. It's the same process as dealing with having an abortion. And they've banned that medical process. So they've gone in there, in between women and their doctors, and in between, urgent life-saving treatments, in the guise of being pro-life. And what you're going to see, as you said, is death rates are going to skyrocket. Their life expectancy is going to go down, and they're going to be taking victory laps saying that they're more pro-life than you are. You know.
Interesting. Jerald, did you see, I forget which politician, but right after the Supreme Court made their decision and went public with it, there was a politician, I forget her name, who said, thank Trump for saving white life. Did you see that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, actually, I just want to say about the stats. I think black women do have a higher rate of abortion than white women. So this idea that they're saving white life, but this is part of the new sentiment in the country. I mean, you can check me on the stats on that, but I believe that black women have a high, it's 3-to-1 ratio almost to white women. Is that correct in terms of the abortion numbers?
I'm not sure if it's that the disparity is that high.
Not more abortions, but I had a higher ratio.
Percentage.
Definitely not more abortions, but at a high. But so this idea, I think, is connected to wanting to give the right wing in the country a gift, and by this, your point earlier that life begins at conception. This is a basic religious idea, the moral majority, and this is a key part of the Republican platform. But this, in terms of the white nationalist sentiment that somehow abortion empowers white people, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure. He can speak more in terms of the science behind it. But yeah, this is a lot of appeasement politics, by which there is this. They're coming out visibly and saying this is what we're about. We're about white nationalism. We're about white life. And even an issue that should go across the line, like abortion, is now become politicized.
What are your take, Jones, on this?
The very same white people who come to us talking this nonsense about, abortion is black genocide, they turn around and they go to white communities and tell them it's white genocide. They just adapt their message to whichever community they're speaking to, and they try to create fear and paranoia in that particular community. Abortion is a worldwide phenomenon. And now, at this point, almost every country in the world now has more access to abortion than the United States. Like almost all people in the world have more access to abortion. We're now one of the most backward countries in the world on this topic. Are all those 8 billion people wrong and the most racist people in America right? So to those of us within our community who are listening to these white pastors and these white supremacists, slow down and think to yourself and ask yourself, why is it that the Taliban is so happy with them and the countries where you would get treated the best in the world are so unhappy with what we're doing,
Yeah. So let's take this time to open up to the room. Is there anyone here who would like to make a statement or have a question? Yes. Oh, you want to grab a mic? Let's pass them the mic.
Oh shit. Maybe I already addressed it, but why do you, at least here, in America, what do you think is the root cause of so much of, I would say, decision making on reproductive rights? What do you feel is the root cause of it? Is it from a capitalistic view? Is it from a social view? Is it from what do you?
I have an answer for that.
Let me finish.
Oh no.
Oh, you good? All right, cool. I was make sure we get everything.
The moral majority in the anti-abortion movement is the segregationist movement. These are the enemies of Martin Luther King. These are people that were out there beating him so many times, trying to kill him many times before they finally succeeded when he was 39 years old.
Right.
And what they did in the 70s was they went from segregation and having schools segregated in particular, they changed their topic to abortion. It was the exact same people. Jerry Falwell, all those people, Pat Robertson, all these white pastors that you see ranting the most about abortion, they were ranting about segregation right until Jimmy Carter came into power. and it was to help elect Ronald Reagan and to go against Carter in the late 70s that they switched their topic to abortion because segregation just wasn't working anymore. So it's exactly, and you can go look it up. Just go type the phrase, the real origins of the religious right in Google, and it'll come right up, and you will see it's the same people, exact same people. They just changed the topic.
Right.
And they gave up on segregation, and they said, all right, let's just make it abortion.
It's like they lost one
battle.
The one battle, so it's like let's
And
pick
they
up
just
this
moved on
other
to something
thing
else
to kind of run on and like.
where they felt like they had a chance to win on that one.
So it's kind of like, I guess they kind of targeted this conservative base that they found, and it was like, all right, racism ain't really hitting like it used to, so let's get
Let's
to
turn
like
to sexism. Yeah.
I get it. Makes sense.
Yeah, I would like to, Jerry, you have anything to say on that?
There's a very famous book written in the 1950s called The Power Elite, and it explained the structure of the United States as a tripartite structure. In essence, he argues in this book that America is an oligarchy consisting of political families, general corporations, and military families. And they really don't know what to do. I'm overemphasizing an earlier point of the changing demographics inside the United States. Within 20 years, it will be very difficult if 60% of the population, because the white vote is split, and so it's the people of color usually win elections. Just going on the last election, the black vote won in Georgia. The black vote in Atlanta, Georgia. The black vote won the state, and I believe in Pennsylvania, and the black vote won in Michigan. So even though we are only 13% of the American population, when there is when the white vote is split, this is quite significant. And so they are really trying to rethink this plan, because in essence, it means that white men are losing power. And by the way, I know the second part of our discussion is going to be on voting rights, but the same court that's eviscerating the voting rights is the same court that's overturning Roe versus Wade. And you can see two parallels here. One, the Republican Party is mostly white, and two, the Republican Party is mostly male. And so they are becoming a minority inside the United States. Obama is the first president really to win with a combined electorate. And that blueprint, the Obama blueprint, meaning he got 70% of the Latino vote, he got 70% of the Asian vote. By the way, the first American to get 70% of the, first Democrat, to get 70% of the Asian vote, 90% of the black vote, 55% of the women's vote. That blueprint is a killer to the Republican Party, and they know it. And so they're trying to take over state legislatures, they're trying to take, obviously, the Congress, and they have already taken over the Supreme Court. And so underneath this is a battle of numbers. Outwardly, yes, it's race, it's sex, but it's also about the numbers.
I want to chime in on this too. I observe a very, and this is sort of piggybacking on what has been said already, I'm observing a very insidious strategy that is using sort of like dog whistle politics, very general political issues that, when legislated on, work to segregate resources, access to resources, economic, health, politics itself, among black and whites. So when we talk about Planned Parenthood or abortion rights, we're talking about health care. And the black and brown community have less access to that than others. So to restrict it even more will drain us a lot faster. If there is a recession, it would hit the black community harder than the white community, which has probably upwards 7 times as much wealth and resources to get back on their feet. And we've seen this strategy, or the clarity of this process in the New Deal. When the New Deal was passed, it was largely supported by the South, with a caveat that FDR allowed the states to manage the budget. And they did this without even saying we're not going to give it to black folk. They did it by saying we're certain job industries cannot get access to these resources. And they selected the resources, service jobs, where largely a number of the largely black people are working. And those who are white will have other ways and means to get some of this New Deal money. And we see it in the GI Bill. And so when we see these attacks on crime, we see an attack on crime, what it means to squeeze down on the black communities and to sabotage the resources, which are literally the bodies, to prey on us, to find every slip and fall of a young black child. And we had this pipeline. Meanwhile, this war on drugs should have been down on Wall Street, down in other affluent neighborhoods that were trafficking in exponentially more drugs, doing way more crime than any person in a black person in an urban community can never do and leverage. And so so we get these terms. So when I hear women's rights or voting rights, protect the vote, protect the border, where we want to protect the border, which border? The border from Latin Americans, South Americans. Meanwhile, we're getting an influx straight in from other European countries. And that gets into change of policies. Well, I wait because voting policies changed in 1965, 64 and 65 was a big year, not just for the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, but there was an Immigration Act that changed the quotas. And we had talked about that. So this is like, we got to get into this. Hate to be the same person that be saying, gotta do your research, but we all say that, right? But literally, I'm saying it really, and as honestly as one can say it, but we have to do it diligently as well. Like this, I just really feel that at this point in the day, in the game, we all need to be up on what's going on. Because if it's not hitting you right away, it's going to hit somebody in your block. When the drug game hit the Harlem community in the 80s, it didn't hit me directly, but it hit my sisters, hit my family, hit my friends. And, I got family and friends who are blaming themselves for systemic issues. And then we further defeat ourselves because we feel like, why I didn't do this or why I didn't do that? I'm not worth anything. It's like, no, it's not your fault. We all make mistakes, but you got a whole regime preying on every move you make. And so we got to get into this so that we could be each one teach one, even if it's just to help uplift each other, to have that audacity to say, listen, I'm going to go to the polls. And I better stop there because I got a lot more to say. But but if anybody got another question about this, anyone want to bring up or comment, please feel free. Yeah, we got another one. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
I was just going to ask, how much do you feel like this is I would say an institution problem as opposed to like an ideological problem, in terms of like a lot of the country is very conservative, even if they don't realize that they are. Like you'll talk to somebody and they'll be like liberal or whatever, but it's like, you talk to them for a little bit, it's like, no, you have a lot of conservative views, especially on like, say like homosexuality or like abortion rights or whatever. So like, the thing with the Roe versus Wade thing, it didn't really happen overnight. This is something that a lot of people have been in support of, not just like in the government, but just like the general public. Like a lot of people, even though they may not be vocal about it, they did agree with what happened. You know what I mean? From an ideological standpoint. So what division do you think, like, all right, this is the government doing something against what the general consensus feels like, nah, we don't want, and how much do you think like, no, we're contributing to it too? We may not necessarily say, because there's a lot of like states around this country that are very conservative. There's a lot of black people who are very conservative, and it's like, where like, you know what I mean?
I want to definitely respond to that, and by repeating what I said before. It's been 18 years since the Republican Party has won the popular vote. That is their only win in the last 34 years. The Republican Party has won the popular vote once in the last 34 years. There's a massive number of voters, actually, who the Republican Party has only won the popular vote once in their lives. And this is happening at the same time the Republicans threw out the Voting Rights Act 9 years ago and have massively restricted voting because they see the writing on the wall. What you're saying is just not true. Republicans are horribly unpopular. This country is not that conservative. It's a lot like Canada or it's Europe, as far as the grassroots opinions of the people. It's just not that conservative. It's not as conservative as a 6-3 Republican Supreme Court. It's not even close. It's more like a 6-3 Democrat Supreme Court. if we have massive institutional problems institutions that do not reflect the will of the people.
Yes, systemic, yeah.
West Virginia, Joe Manchin, that senator from West Virginia, he represents the population of like Philly. And yet he has equal power to a senator from a state of 40 million people. You look at that and you say, oh, yeah, there's a lot of, no, it's 1.5 million people or whatever West Virginia is, 1.9 million or something like that. That's, yeah, you know. Yeah, those people, that 1.9 million people in West Virginia, they are very racist. That is probably the most racist state in the country. No question. But 1.9 million is not equal to 40 million of California. It's not equal to New York's nearly 20 million. And the institutions that are making 1.5 million equal 20 million or 40 million, that has the country on the verge of a civil war. It's very unstable. It can't last. It will resolve itself by force. Those people, that 1.9 million people, they're not going to give up that power peacefully. You know, at some point, the majority is going to get fed up because the disparities keep increasing. So California's population is going up really, really fast. California has like more people than like it has almost as many people as Florida and Texas combined, the next two states after the second and third in population. And yet they're supposedly equal with West Virginia. It just doesn't make any sense. And so you have these tiny little stagnant groups of backward people holding back the country and making us a laughingstock and an embarrassment in the world. And it's just not going to continue.
Yeah, I just want to add on, just in terms of your numbers. So Wyoming actually has about 500,000 people, right? So they have 2 senators with 500,000 people. So which means if you compare the ratio of the vote, that's almost like an 80-to-1 vote. That means a person voting for a senator in Wyoming has the same voting power as a person voting in California. Yet this population is only 500,000, and the other population is 40 million. Right. So we in essence we don't have one person, one vote. But going back to your point about ideological versus systemic, yeah, racism is purely systemic, right? Racism is not one person disliking another person, right? It is the power to deny a job. It is the power to deny me from getting an education or a location or living in a certain location. And so once again, under the new norms, under the new demographic norms, this country is radically changing. And what you're seeing is white males trying to hold on to power, viciously trying to hold on to power by eviscerating voting laws, by overturning Roe versus Wade. I was speaking to Jones earlier. I really don't know the plan behind Roe versus Wade because a lot of the Republicans are going to lose female votes. In fact, I was mentioning early on why Trump lost the election in certain states, but a key in the majority of white states, white women that voted for him before didn't vote for him in the second election. So he lost the white women's, well, he didn't lose. I think he did get the white women's vote overall, but
His white female vote went up.
right. But in a couple of in the swing states I was talking about, in the swing states.
Black turnout went up, and that's what actually defeated Trump. But white women leaned more for Trump in the second time around. So I want to make a critical comment about the Republican Party. The majority of Republican voters are not white men. The majority of white women are Republicans. 19% of the Republican Party is not non-black people of color, and about 1% is black. So the Republican Party, most of the voters are not white men, but almost 100% of the people they elect are white men. So there's a very important caveat that you have to say is that the people who are violently determined to keep white men on top are mostly not white men themselves. You have a lot of white women, number one, that's the biggest block. And then you have that group of people of color who are white supremacists and who are very sexist. And that group is growing, and a lot of these people on January 6th were light-skinned people of color. You had a good few Latinos, light-skinned Latinos. You had some Asians there. And in both of those populations, this is like between 30 and 40% of those groups that are Republican voters that are devoted to elevating white men above everybody else. So this is a growing problem, and it's a huge problem in a country like Brazil. Brazil is much more diverse than the U.S. Whites are a minority there. And yet they have a white supremacist president because mixed race Brazilians and other people of color, people we would call Latinos and, and Asians and people like that, vote for white male supremacism. So the demographic doom that Republicans fear is not that fearsome, but what they're doing with the voting rights abuses that Kasaun wants to talk about next, that's going to be big. That's going to be big.
Yeah, we're going to definitely get to that. I want to just chime in on one thing, and we can take a quick break unless y'all want to power through. When you ask between institutional, the issue is institutional ideological. I don't see it as one or the other, but I think it's predominantly ideological, which transforms into the institution. That's why we have laws that are preventing black people from getting access to institutions. Because an ideology is occupied. So when you hear Occupy Wall Street, I always say we need to occupy politics, right? Because we can't really change somebody's mind in a lifetime, but we can change legislation and get access to opportunities to change our environment. And this is a big point that Jones brought out, that you have white women who supported Trump, very proud to have Trump, even though it might cost them some health, women's rights. And it's not just white women. I've seen white men on the TV and doing interviews with literally almost no teeth in their mouth, and somebody was being interviewed. Obamacare can help you get access to a dentist, and the guy said, "I don't care because Obamacare is for those other folks too. So if they're getting it, I don't want it." And it reminded me of, I don't know what your religious persuasion is, but I see a very fitting scripture here. You remember the woman who had a child? It was two women complaining to King Solomon about a baby. One woman said, "This is my child." The other one said, "No, it's my child." Right? So I'm like, "How are you going to solve this?" He said, "Cut it in half." Right. And the one woman said, "All right, fine. Yeah, cut it in half." The other woman said, "You know what? No, let her have it." That is what white supremacists are willing to do.
Yes. Yep.
They would cut this country in half. And we've seen it already in the first Civil War.
Yep.
They will allow their rights to slip away if it's going to make sure you all suffer. Yeah. They're willing to go that far. So I think maybe if anyone else want to say something, let me know. This is open. But we could take a quick break.
Okay.
We can get DJ Twist in the house to drop some music and maybe get some water, get some drinks, whatever, and then we start the voting rights. Sure. Oh, before we do that, I got a quick question. With a prize. Let me put this up here. Let's make this. Who was the first black African American female mayor in the United States of America? And whoever gets that, you're going to get an underwhelming prize, I guess. I have a copy of the United States Constitution. So let's pop the music on. Think about that question. Do the Malcolm X, any means necessary to get the answer and get your prize, all right? So we'll get the answer back. Thanks again for tuning in to the Political Soul Food Forum. We'll be right back after this break. All right, we are in our second round. Well, we're about to get into the second round. For those of you who just got in, this is the Political Soul Food Forum. This is a platform to discuss politics impacting the black community in particular and the world in general at large. So we just had our discussion on abortion rights, and we're going to move on to voting rights in general. Obviously, they're connected. So the last question, the trivia question we had is, who was the first African American? I put black African American female mayor in the USA. I think enough of us had ample time to get the answer. Anybody ready to go other than the panelists? Okay, so let's go. Here we go. Let's take our next slide here. Leila Foley Davis became the first African American female mayor in 1973 in Oklahoma, in a small town there. I think it's Taft. I pose this question because I always try to remember the significance of politics, talking about it, and trying to figure out, how does it relate to my life in the here and now. And this is a question I asked myself actually. And what's soulful about this question is that when I looked up this question and found this lady, she's described as someone who had 5 kids, divorced, on welfare. And you want to talk about the American dream in the sense of pulling yourself up with your own bootstraps. She literally did that. Fought tooth and nail for her community. And it just reminds me of the power of engagement and how if we could cultivate various seeds like Leela Foley Davis around the country and within our communities, we can get a lot of change. And by cultivating that, I'm talking about being a part of the political system. As Aristotle says, we are political animals. And some people may just look at the surface and say, oh, does that mean voting? No, the fact that we are dependent on each other as a civilization, we are all just enjoying the gifts and contributions of other human beings who live, thousands of years before us. And I feel like there's a little bit of a generational depth there, humanity depth there. And this is me spiraling into why I find this platform very important, to uncover individuals who fought for a reality that is better than the one that they've experienced. So I encourage you to look her up, and her story, her biography, it might impact you in different ways. But since we're talking about voting and women's rights, she was definitely someone I think that pictures very clearly into the kinds of things that we discuss and will discuss. So we finish our break. Part 2 is voting rights. So let's get into voting rights. And to kickstart this, like I did in the first part, I went, and looked up some stuff. And as we know, when Obama was elected, Obama made history. And we saw a surge in black voter turnout. We saw a surge in voter turnout at large. At the same time, we saw a surge in resistance. And one of these manifests in the crippling of access to the polls. And the Shelby versus Holder, Obama's Attorney General, was a case that crippled the Voting Rights Act. And I want to start this discussion off going back to Obama's election, which is kind of ironic in a sense. It's almost like a Twilight Zone. Here it is, we have not just the first black president, we get amazing voter turnout, but we also lose access to voting. And so here's what the Supreme Court says in this case. Chief Justice Roberts delivered the opinion of the court. This decision was made in 2013. In fact, this case, I think, got started around 2009. So it's been like an ongoing battle. So this goes to someone who mentioned, when did this stuff happen? When did this happen? And this is ongoing fight that we need to be aware of, because we only become aware of it when some catastrophic event or policy happens. And so here's what they say. This is the majority opinion written by Chief Justice Roberts. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 employed extraordinary measures to address an extraordinary problem. Section 5 of the act required states to obtain federal permission before enacting any law related to voting. A drastic departure from basic principles of federalism. And Section 4 of the act applied that requirement only to some states, an equally dramatic departure from the principle that all states enjoy equal sovereignty. This was strong medicine, but Congress determined it was needed to address entrenched racial discrimination in voting. Quote, an insidious and pervasive evil which had been perpetuated in certain parts of our country through unremitting and ingenuous defiance of the Constitution, end quote. South Carolina versus Katzenbach, that was the case. As we explained in upholding the law, quote, exceptional conditions can justify legislative measures not otherwise appropriate. Reflecting the unprecedented nature of these measures, they were scheduled to expire after 5 years. See Voting Rights Act of 1965. So I stop there. This is sort of leading into the Supreme Court's rationale. Just to fill in the gap that I left out, they basically don't see the same dramatic reasons to have Section 5 and Section 4 in the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act, meaning that states, American states are no longer, certain southern states are no longer trying to explicitly and conspicuously prevent people from voting, particularly black people. What is your take on that measure, and how do you think it's impacted the black vote? This is my question to Jones Murphy and our guest, Jerald Times.
My take is look at what happened within hours of this ruling. All right, within hours of this ruling, Texas rushed to close thousands of polling stations in black neighborhoods. They rushed in a whole bunch of Confederate measures. They started partying like it was 1899. They just went back to doing the same things that this ruling said were no longer a problem, and we didn't need the Voting Rights Act anymore. And since then, they have just steadily escalated all these measures. And at the root of it is a profound racial divide in attitudes towards voting rights. So if you ask black Americans, should voting be a right or a privilege? 80% say it should be a right. Ask Latinos and Asians, it drops a little bit, like 70%, but still in the range of civilized people around the world. As white Americans, it's a completely different story. It's 50-50. So about half of white Americans say voting should not be a right. And that's the heart of this problem. The Confederate mindset is just infests the white population. They don't, well, half of them will just admit that they don't admit that voting should be a right. And here we are.
This Jerald, what's your take on this?
I just want to go back to an earlier point about the Shelby versus Holder. So they put in this stipulation, what they call pre-clearance in the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act of 1964. Basically, if you're going to close down voting sites, if you're going to purge voting rolls, any other voting suppression, it first has to be cleared with the Justice Department. So when they gutted out Section 5, that means the Justice Department cannot stop the voter suppression. As a result of that, as Mr. Murphy's mentioning, over 1,000 voting sites have been closed, particularly in black communities. Right. So what is the concern? I mean, why are they trying to turn back the clock? And again, it's the blueprint of the multiracial democracy inside the United States that Obama demonstrated. So once again, he won 70% of the Latino vote, 70% of the Native American votes. He got the white youth vote between 18 and 29, 55% of the women's vote, and about 90% of the black vote. That blueprint is a killer for the Republican Party. And so now they're bringing in these various forms of voter suppression from, and even I think they had a felony one where felons are not allowed, even if they serve time to vote. And then this ridiculous voting law in Georgia. I guess you guys have heard about the one in Georgia where if you pass out water on the voting line, it's considered, a misdemeanor. So in every which way, they are looking to suppress the vote, and that's what I think the current fight is going to be about.
Okay, so you know what I found very interesting? The states that were on this just pre-clearance watch list are the same states that were a part of the Confederate. Right, and are the same states that had these trigger laws waiting for the dismantling of Roe v. Wade. And so this goes back to our earlier question, is this ideology and is this institution? And we see this trend, even, states that are explicitly against, enfranchisement for black and brown people are the same ones with these sort of generic, repairing of American democracy. They find these different like white dog whistle politics. But when I look at the list of the states, they're all the same. The states that are attacking voting rights in the black community are the same states attacking women's rights. And that's why, I felt like it was kind of justified to join these two topics when we look at the sponsors of a lot of these bills. So with that in mind, some of this, unfortunately, is largely missing or unknown information in some black corners and sectors. I remember hearing not too long ago, Martin Luther King Jr. did all this fighting for the Voting Rights Act, and look at what it did to the black community. And it struck me kind of hard because apparently the person I was speaking with didn't look at how this very act has been attacked. In fact, the attack against the Section 5 and Section 4 started under Nixon. It was one of the things that Nixon wanted to touch, but it was too soon, and he didn't have enough support in the Senate. So this has been like a long-term strategy to attack this. So what has been your experience in terms of talking about this issue among the black community, the need to vote, and sometimes, we know about ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, who sort of turned his narrative on his head that voting rights is sort of this ploy to get people to assimilate and not be like wholly black. Meanwhile, when we lose voting rights, we're actually falling into the very demise that people are saying, we are falling into because of King. It's so convoluted. Like, what is your take on that?
ADOS is a very interesting movement because they were started by the Republican Party to delegitimize Barack Obama. So the Republicans said, along with calling him an illegal immigrant from Kenya, they started a black movement to delegitimize him as not being a descendant of people enslaved in the United States. So the ADOS people, these are black people, super ignorant people, who don't understand that Europeans were enslaving black people in Africa for generations before Columbus was born. So the European invasion and occupation of Africa started a couple generations before Columbus was born. When Columbus was a baby, the Pope at that time put a blessing of God on the perpetual enslavement of black people. This all happened before Europeans knew they were America, and there was a way to cross the Atlantic, right? This was all going on right then. The ADOS people don't know that stuff. And they subscribe to this very ignorant belief that blacks from Africa, blacks from the Caribbean, and so on are fundamentally different from black Americans. It's kind of a divide and conquer movement that the Republicans funded, and it has grown, and they spent a lot of time trying to discourage blacks from voting, and specifically discourage blacks from voting for Democrats, in effect supporting the Republican Party. So it's an interesting thing, and while they're doing this, the Republicans are just relentlessly attacking voting rights in every way they can. And the attacks on the voting rights are interacting with America's fundamentally anti-democratic institutions. They were built for slavery. They were built to misrepresent the will of the people. The Electoral College was built to calculate black people as 3/5 of a human being. And you have these institutions magnifying the power. The Senate, which is horrible, gives West Virginia equal power to California. These institutions interact with the voting rights abuses to create a lot of Republican power, even though, like I've mentioned, Republicans haven't won the popular vote in 18 years. So after 9 years of escalating voting rights abuses, they're not even close to winning the popular vote. After January 6th last year, in the weeks afterwards, they passed 28 different states passed hundreds of new bills restricting voting rights. They're still not going to win the popular vote. But when you combine that with the anti-democratic institutions, the Electoral College, the Senate garbage, the gerrymandering in the House, it's enough for Republicans, I think, to win elections for the rest of our lives, while being horribly unpopular. All of this stuff that we're talking about, the voting rights stuff in particular, is key to everything else. Without that Shelby versus Holder decision and the tossing of the Voting Rights Act, Trump could not have gamed the Electoral College. It helped him to get by and game and use another institution as instrument of slavery to get power to do yet more damage, which is the abortion decision, and do all kinds of other damage as well. There's the global warming decision. There's all sorts of COVID decisions, all these anti-scientific, ignorant, illogical, mediocre decisions that we're getting stemming from the abuses of voting rights. The abuses of voting rights are disconnecting the United States from civilization and pushing the country towards a civil war. Because you can't vote your way out of sufficiently severe voting rights abuses. At some point, the majority is just going to get fed up and start to hammer the minority and let them know you're not a majority of the population. You're not even close. And that's where I feel like things are going to end up. I just don't see this being settled peacefully. I don't see how.
Jerald, what you say about this?
I just want to go back to an earlier point that you made about the possible disillusionment of our younger people in regards to the into the voting. So there is a certain level of apathy, but that apathy is not by accident. And a lot of the disinformation you see on the social media platforms are they're discrediting Democrats, they're discrediting the electoral process. And a lot of these platforms are also pro-Trump. So you have a disproportionate you have a higher number of Black Americans voting for Trump than any other Republican candidate. I think you told me since Eisenhower.
Something like that, yeah.
But I don't believe it's because Trump is pro-Black or anything. A lot of this is what they're facing. So there's two ways that the Republicans win. One, we don't vote at all, and two, we vote Republican. And there's only one way that they lose, and that way is that we vote Democrat. So if you can flood the community with these disinformation on various digital platforms, you can create a mass apathy within the Black community. So I don't really know whether or not what's going on with a lot of these young people, but they are getting their information from social media platforms as opposed to New York Times / maybe sometimes from Fox News. But in general, I think the flood of this information is an existential threat to the community.
On that note, I wanted to throw something in. I went to a lecture, book lecture by Dr. Carol Anderson, who wrote the book White Rage. And she talks about how subtle it is. Like most people think white rage is just, the KKK, out with the hoodies. But it works within institutions and in different policies. But there was a part of her talk when she was going through some of her research and researching meetings and minutes and stuff of the meetings. And so this question came up, and this was sort of a little bit right after the Voting Rights Act. And the question was posed to this group. Look like Black folks gonna be voting now. The law is passed, and we cannot stop them using force or duress the way we did before. So what do we do? And someone came up with the answer. Aha, we gotta make them not want to vote. And I've since noticed this uprise of not just covert attacks and dismantling poll stations, but also this populating of conspiracies or preying on Black trauma. And it happened with COVID. Hey, don't take the vaccine. Look at what happened with the Tuskegee. And it's the twisting of our history. The whole Tuskegee experiment was largely about not giving us access to vaccines, right? And some people said, I'm not taking it. Look at what happened to Tuskegee. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, we really got to get that much, intimate, much more intimate with our history. But just going back to what you're saying, getting us to not vote, not just, forcibly like at the polls, but also this apathy. And it was amazing to see this apathy right when Obama was elected. I don't know if you remember the We Count, Dr. Cornel West and Tavis Smiley, Jesse Jackson. They all had this huge round table evaluating Obama. And it's like 2009. Like the dude was probably still looking for the West Wing, like I'm lost, And they're saying, what has he done for us? And I saw very early on that this is going to impact the midterms. And it did. We had one of the greatest voter turnouts in 2008. And in 2010, it was like almost a no-show. And what happened? We lose the House. And then now we end up getting the least productive Congresses. one of the least productive Congresses since like Truman and before. And that stalemate led to more apathy. And in 2014, we lose the Senate. Meanwhile, 2013, Shelby versus Holder hits. The polls are now attacked. So just as you said, there's the fork, the devil's fork, the pitchfork. We get hit forcibly at the polls, and we get hit with apathy, and then Trump comes, and then along with Trump, the Supreme Court. Like, this is how vital this voting thing is.
But imagine all through this, right? All through this, the Republicans are steadily losing the popular vote. They are never coming close to convincing a majority of the population at all. Institutions and instruments of slavery are magnifying their power when in fact they're constantly losing the popular vote. They're constantly horribly unpopular. All through this time, they're never winning the popular vote. So yeah, there's rises and falls in Democratic turnout. Republican is horribly unpopular all this time. A low quality democracy, the lowest quality democracy in the developed world, it is a fundamental problem here, and it's just gotten much worse. It's just gotten much worse.
Well, this goes back to the institution, ideology institution. The ideology has impacted and manipulated and tweaking the institution, which also leads to apathy, because people see that the institutions are obviously wired in favor of the minority.
Yes.
But that's precisely why we need to be active, because if we look at it in a different way, they're trying to safeguard the institution so that we don't participate. We got a question?
Yeah, I was gonna, cause like I'm 26, so I understand.
You want to? Let's grab the mic here. All right, we got a question on the house.
See, like I'm 26 years old, and I definitely notice a certain level of apathy and like nihilism that exists just in my generation, and I'm always conflicted because I'm like, all right, yes, you should care about things, but I also understand the sort of like absurdist nihilistic sensibility that comes with a lot of the shit that's going on, because like y'all come from a perspective of y'all see the things that are happening, but y'all have the background to understand why it's happening. My generation, things are just happening. And like to us, it's like, all right, fuck this whole shit. Like, we don't really understand the causality of things, so we just look at it as like, things just are. And that, to me, like, things just are like the root of nihilism. Like, there is no inherent meaning. There is no inherent, these things are just happening around me and I have zero control over it. Some guy that I've never met is making a decision on my life. And that's, I guess my question is like, how do you, someone in my age range, how do you really battle that idea of like nihilism versus like, all right, let's actually contribute to the system, even though it doesn't really seem to be giving a shit about me.
On some, I'm not saying that
good question.
On some level, you are the most informed generation. And you have access to tools, technology that previous generations never.
I think we're the most misinformed generation.
I'm not saying whether you're informed or misinformed, but you do have access. Right. And the reality is that a lot of that is being hijacked, is being co-opted. Right. The way the algorithm works on the computer, if you go on a site like QAnon, it's going to continue to feed you the same information.
Facts.
Right? So, and the purpose is to keep you on the computer, and so they can sell products and so forth. But on a basic level, I think the challenge of your generation is to decipher the information. You are being flooded. It isn't that you guys lack information. Well, I mean, information and truth are two different things. But that has to be a quest. And if you want to learn about the history, you have the same access to history that we do. The causation is because we read books. You guys can go on Wikipedia right now and learn much faster. So, but there has to be some level of intentionality, right? You have to see that you are living in a broken system, and if we do not react to that broken system, the environment, women's rights, voting rights, racial equity, all that's on stake. And what's unique to the black generation is that every 10, 20 years, we have to fight for these things all over again. So even though it's been written in the Constitution, even though it's been written in the law, there are time leases on all of these, on our voting rights. Imagine that, right? So which means that every 10, 15, 20 years, they vote on our voting rights. on whether to renew the bills of 64 and 65. So I think what I'm really trying to say that a lot of your intention is hijacked. I don't know if the apathy is innate.
Right. But see, like, you ever been in school and like your teacher will like say your teacher will say something and then they'll be like, any questions? And like no one raises their hand. But it's not because like they don't have questions. They don't even know what to ask. Like, you've been so confused you don't even know what to ask. I think that's what our generation is categorized by. It's like, it's not that the questions aren't there. We literally don't even know what the problem is ideologically, or we don't even really understand what the question is.
I feel like a lot of information is being hidden from you. Think about the facts that I talked about, right? Republican Party hasn't won the popular vote in 18 years. When have you heard this on any mainstream media? That's like a critical fact. And that 18-year-old win is their only win in the last 34 years. Again, when have you ever heard this fact on the media? That's a big deal. They're up 6-3 on the Supreme Court. How does a group of people that is so horribly unpopular get that much power?
Because it's like, if we live in a time where everything is commodified, the only power is knowing how to market yourself. Republicans know how to market. I don't care if they know anything about politics. I don't care if they know anything about people, demographics. They have this uncanny ability to market themselves and know how to sensationalize and know how to incite emotion.
You know, I don't see that. I just see mediocrity as far as I can see with the Republicans. What I do see is bias and discrimination in the media itself in terms of the staffing, who they hire, who they promote, who makes the editorial decisions, who chooses what facts you're going to hear. The people who are choosing the facts you're going to hear do not want you to know that Republicans almost always lose the popular vote. They just don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that Joe Manchin represents.
Who cares if they lose the popular vote? If the game is that the popular vote doesn't matter, then who cares?
That's not the game in civilized countries. And it's very important to stress that we have.
In this country, so we have to wake up and
But-
say, what are we going to do about that?
If-
Don't just keep saying, oh,
But that starts with the fact.
But play by their game or change the game.
The facts,
But you don't know if there's a game to change when the fact never comes up. So
the facts are distorted. If Mark Zuckerberg is a Republican, the facts are
He is.
distorted.
Yes.
Like, we're dealing
Yes.
with, if Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and
just
Jeff
before you go on,
Bezos are
just before you go
Republican.
on, Mark Zuckerberg, for example, this morning blocked me from commenting on Facebook again. And when I started doing podcasts with Kasaun a couple of years ago, they just escalated restrictions against me. They were just coming at me, just
Shadow ban, they dox you.
they did all kinds of stuff to me. I couldn't live stream anymore, because I'm saying things like Republicans haven't won the popular vote in 18 years. They make efforts to ensure that your generation doesn't get to hear a lot of facts, a lot of.
You know, I want
I
to. Can I
want to
chomp?
get to her point. I want to get to her point. That is a fundamental change. We need to end the electoral college for sure.
So how do we do that?
It's hard to do because whether we want to acknowledge it or not, most of the platforms that we engage in are very neoconservative. Even if
Yes.
they don't want to present it that way,
Yep.
they are very neoconservative. Like, they quote unquote vote Democrat, they vote liberal, but Mark Zuckerberg is conservative and he controls how like 80% of what we digest. If he owns Facebook, Instagram, blah 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 blah, then most people get their news from Twitter. Most people get their news from TikTok. Most people get their news from Instagram. Nobody's reading the paper. So if you have 3 or 4 people who are controlling all of the avenues of information, what do I expect my demographic or my country or my people to really believe if certain information don't even make it to you?
All
Can I
the
chime in?
information. Okay.
Yeah, I was to chime in a little bit. So I'm closer, in age to you, and I kind of experienced that, as you laid it out, those sentiments. Jerald had mentioned, so I'm going to combine what Jerald and Jones said. And Jerald used the term broken system, and Jones had talked about the hidden information. And I think that it does start with the exposing of the facts or the reality that we are in. And the system is broken for us, yes, but I think combining what Jones and Jerald is saying, I also see the system breaking down for them as well, which is why there's increased pressure, which is why we need to know why certain data is hidden from us, because that's motivation. If people want to know the score in a game, when you're playing, you want to know the score. We got 10 seconds left. This is the score. You're going to hustle very differently. So this idea of the audacity to hope that Obama's bringing about, a lot of people, I think, saw that as just this wishful thinking. What he was trying to do is galvanize us to see the goalpost, to see the prize. That his victory wasn't necessarily the victory from our efforts, but it was a victory that occurred by efforts of people nearly more than 50 years ago. Case in point, I always mention this. In 1966, Sammy Davis Jr. was given a talk in Florida, Overton, Florida, right before his performance. People were distraught because after the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were passed, white supremacists didn't let up. They were actually stoning people trying to get to the polls. And people were saying, this is what we fought for, this is what this victory was for. Nothing's changed. And this is on record, actually. Someone sent this to me, because they know I like to listen to these anecdotes, and sent me, said, oh, you might like Sammy Davis Jr. giving this positive talk about being in the system, because that's how I'm viewed, as this sort of jolly black liberal in a sense. And so he's talking. He says, y'all need to know that something's changed. At this point, we have an opportunity for a young kid. It could be somebody 5 years old in here who can now become president. There's been a crack in the concrete of white supremacy that a black rose can go through. And so my dissertation is on Obama, so I'm going to see connections that most probably wouldn't see with that number. 1966, Obama was born 1961. He would have been 5 years old. Obviously, Sammy Davis Jr. is not talking about him, but in 50 years, that would have been, 2016. So Obama actually came early. It was almost like a prophecy in a sense. But I think the poetics in this is that Sammy Davis Jr., out of all people, understood the importance of being informed when things change in a system. Understanding that what a Voting Rights Act can do for us is not going to snap a finger and change things. But people need to know that our numbers would tip the scale. Why? Because as Jerald mentioned, there is a very fine divide between white Americans who vote Republican and Democrat. This is why the black vote is very important, because we tip that scale. But if we don't show up, and if we don't even know that we can tip the scale, we would never will. And that's what voter apathy is about, making sure we're uninformed. Interestingly, about when Obama was really pushing for more libraries, polls were taken among Republicans about the importance of college and education. The majority of Republicans voted that colleges are messing up America. Going back to being informed, they're too liberal. And now we see it more explicitly on critical race theory, banning books. So the system, when we say the system is broken, yes, but we also have to know that we put a dent in it. Part of that brokenness is because we broke it. Black and brown people voting.
And I mean, that's I just want to add. In some ways, we never speak about black exceptionalism. We're 13% of the American population. We are 30% of the military, of the armed forces. We're 18% of the Congress. We're 75% of the NBA, about 70% of the NFL, and we're about 30% of all American icons. Yet we're only 13% of the population. So, and Jones was mentioning before about missing information. You're not going to get those stats. You're going to hear about the negative stats. So adding on, hybriding to Kasaun's point, we are incredibly impactful, as a collective. And so when you speak about scientific and technological advancement, it may come from the mainstream population, but the social, political evolution in America has often come through African Americans.
I I agree, but I don't think impact results in. I don't think impact leads to results, because in terms of like, all right, yes, we had a black president. We have the biggest black entertainers in the world, and they're all.
And by the way, we are the only, in Western history, we are the only people that has ever produced a black president. That's how phenomenal that is.
We the only people that have ever produced a black president. We got black billionaires. We got black blah, 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 blah. What is that? What has any of that done for all of the problems that affect black people systemically? In terms of, it's cool that LeBron James could shoot a jump shot fire. It's great. What does that do for mass incarceration? What does that do for poor education? What does that do for black and brown communities being deprived of resources? Like, we have a lot of black exceptionalism. Like, we all know that we're great. We're fire. We're intelligent. We good at shit. We can do all these other things. But systemically, what has that changed in this country? We done had all the exceptional Negroes on the planet. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, LeBron James, Jay-Z, Obama. You can name all of them. What has that done systemically for our problems?
So one of the things we have to do, if we're really serious about that question, we need to take inventory of some serious numbers. The numbers of what percentage of black and brown people, it's a sociological study almost in a sense. When we look at poverty, access to education, access to health, and we measure that now compared to that access to the past, we see a lot of change. What the problem is that black exceptionalism, when Jerald mentioned that, he mentioned that to show our brightest, that we can compete at the highest levels. But he's not saying that that is the goal, just to produce a black exceptional. What we have to do is look at how they got there and why they're there. So when we only stop at a LeBron James, we miss all of the cracks that were needed to be made. There are other firsts before LeBron James. You know, for the first time now, I'm seeing way more PhDs. I got a scientist, physicist here. We got a chess master right here. And who knows who else is in here, in this room. We don't get that information. That's what the change. We're looking at the product of the civil rights movement. We got black royalty as a community, not just at the pinnacle. So and that's what the forum is about. You know, we can try to get special guests, but what about the diamonds right here in our backyards? Because that would change how we think about ourselves. And like, I'm the product, of that. As a former chess player, my coach was the first black chess grandmaster. Being aware of that motivated me to do other things. It didn't lead me down a path of chess for my entire life, but it showed me that I can do it. I can break ground as well. But it's also passing that baton to allow other people in my community to let them know, to remind them that they can break ground, support them. That's what the exceptionalism does. It breaks ground, but also motivates us. It creates pathways. And a lot of times the pathway gets patched up, and so we don't know it's there. So we talk about Obama being president as opposed to what it meant for him to be there and all the laws for him to get there. All the amazing people who are now following similar footsteps. Obama read Malcolm X, one of his greatest motivators. Malcolm X near the end of his life said, if I could do it, if I didn't have to fight in the civil rights movement, more or less, I would want to become a lawyer. Obama saw Harold Washington become a lawyer. He's reading that work. That inspired him. But what happens to the narrative? Obama is just part of the elite. He's just some black president. Meanwhile, he already wrote decades before he would ever become a president. Yeah, I graduated from Harvard, but there's so many other brothers and sisters out here who don't got this access. How do I give them that access? But the narrative to us is some black exceptional who's aloof and other stuff. So part of it is, and this is partly by design, there's an attack on our pipeline of communication and education. Because if you don't tap into the motivations in this world, in this society, then you might not ever activate them. And I'm going to pass the mic real fast, but one of the things that I flipped in my mindset is people always talk about politics as being, mostly my homeboys, they attack symbolism. When we should be celebrating symbolism. Because symbolism is the stuff of change. Symbolism was that which was used, the different stereotypes. One of the earliest movies by W.D. Griffith, Birth of a Nation, was about painting black men as savages trying to hunt down and rape white women. One of the earliest productions in TV that is, I think, in the Library of Congress now, received amazing awards. Imagine what that do in the psyche. So a part of it is there's a lot of things happening to us, and there's also a lot of things that we need to do as well. And having, Jerald and Jones and others who are invited, this helps bridge that generational gap, because there are struggles that they went through that we need to know. There are accomplishments that they've made that we need to know. And I remember my mom said, she talked about her first job. I always loved Black history. To read it, I thought I was doing something. Until my mom said, she was talking to my nieces, and they were talking about their first job. And my mom said, oh, I remember my first job. She was like going down memory lane. It was, and she had to remember, she's in her 80s. She said, yeah, it was in the color section of the Greyhound bus station. I got caught on color section. Like, my mom is history. And it made me move very differently. I have opportunities that she never had at my age. The sacrifices she had to make. She's a product of going to school with, affirmative action. When that opportunity became available in the 60s and 70s, she did that. And she passed that baton to me. And that was kind of encouraging for me and motivating. It wasn't overnight, but it was motivating. And I think that is what helps us to change, starting with this dialogue. See, the problem, I think, ultimately is that a lot of young white folks, they see America as their inheritance. And you'll fight tooth and nail for your own house when you think it's yours. So for us, we don't kind of have that feeling. So it's like, it's a broken system. It's not for us, and we're not putting 100% effort into it. And it's only worse when we can't even see our own contributions.
But
exactly.
You know what I think? You know what I think is the fundamental difference? Like, and this is like a tangent, but I remember, like, when I was young, I was watching the show Static Shock. You know the cartoon Static Shock? Like, there's an episode where the main character goes to Africa, and he says, like, here I don't feel like a black person. I just feel like a person while I'm here in Africa. I just feel like a person, right? And I think that when we talk about, like, black exceptionalism, like things that you've seen that inspired you, that doesn't mean these things aren't valid. That doesn't mean these things aren't inspiring. But why do you have to be exceptional to be accepted? Like, in terms of, like, educated, chess master, you're this. Why do you have to be those things in order to be viewed as a person? Whereas opposed to, like, a white person is just a person. Like, we're talking about, like, exceptionalism, being better than you are, like reaching your highest extent.
I want to give further clarification on exceptionalism. Let me just say, in this regard, the question is why. I mean, why are we successful in the Congress? Why are we successful in the NBA and the military and so forth? When you remove the color line, we exceed. Right. So the point is not it's not about exceptionalism. The point should be about why do we succeed in certain areas.
Is it out of genuine ability?
Okay. So let's look at the Reconstruction period.
Okay.
We were exceptional. Right. In 3 states, we were the dominant vote. We were the dominant vote meaning majority vote in Mississippi was black. The majority vote in Louisiana was black. And I believe the majority vote in South Carolina was black. At that moment during Reconstruction, we elected 1,500 officials. We opened up colleges. We opened up churches, funeral homes. Even eventually, we opened up sports teams, etc. right? So it means when you remove the color line, that's when that exceptionalism comes. That means we're just as good and bad as everybody else, but we have demonstrated it. And again, going back to the question for your generation, the way it is in the history of the United States, every black generation has to fight for its voting rights. It is not guaranteed. And that's why it's so important for you to educate yourself, right? And I do believe that because of digital platforms, a lot of your attention has been hijacked, right? The moment we have, pardon my vulgarity, the moment we're doing bitch, ho, nigger inside the music and so forth, that means you're being hijacked.
Yep.
Right? You do not control. I tell hip-hoppers this all the time. There are 3 points of hip-hop. You have the image, the video, you have the beats, and you have the lyrics. The only thing that you can control is the beat. Right? You may write the lyrics, but if they don't like the lyrics, they're not going to produce the lyrics. Right? So it's not by accident that you got here. Right? But if you remove those external barriers, we succeed. And that's the point.
Yeah. And this is what's interesting. I'm glad we're on this topic because one of my main concerns, and really why I wanted to get into voting rights, is not really just to talk about just the stats, but our sentiments and our, and apathy is one of the key things that Jones and I talk about a lot. And I see it a lot in the youth. And my own personal thing is that, I just want to motivate us to see that cup filling up every time we look at, every time we have discussions on politics, it's always from a deficit. But that's because of our historical purview. We have to go further back. I remember when Obama got elected, and I think it was a millennial that said to me, oh, politics is just going back and forth. What has a Democrat done for us in the last, 40 years? And this Obama had just got elected. It says it's been a Republican, then it's been a Democrat. I said, all right, let's do this. And I went through a little political math with them, starting from the Civil Rights Act, since that's the thing that they remember as far as back. Between 1968 and 2008, Republicans have won 7 out of 10 presidencies. But for the young person I was talking to, they only saw a few years back. So now their whole judgment about what's going on in politics and who's doing what is based on that limited understanding of history, with nothing else about what we've done and what we've overcome and what we've been up against in all of that. And so now we're always on the defensive. And one thing I learned about chess, if you have an advantage and you play defensively, you lose your advantage, if not the game. You would lose. And so we cannot afford to miss out on the opportunities, to miss out on the cracks. Instead of just looking at the black exceptionalism, look at the cracks and the pathways. How can we further break ground?
Kasaun, you said something really important because you alluded to a generation when Republicans used to win the popular vote. And that period was immediately after civil rights. In the preceding generation, they did very, very badly. So in the 40 years between Herbert Hoover and Nixon, Republicans put one guy in the White House, Eisenhower. They did horribly, horribly. Civil Rights Act passed, and they start winning elections. They won 5 of the next 6 presidential elections. Nixon and Reagan tied for the biggest electoral vote victories of all time. White people were angry as hell about the legacy of Martin Luther King. And that didn't start fading until around the time Bill Clinton came in. And then Republicans finally, and the key reason for that is the Voting Rights Act. And another reason for that is what happened the same year that Kasaun alluded to, which is the end of racist immigration quotas. When the European empires came into the Americas and they were being built, they were majority black. The initial colonies, most of the first slaves here were not in 1619. They were almost a century before, brought by the Spanish to Florida, St. Augustine. Those were majority black colonies, and there were a massive number of black people building up. New York City was, Dutch brought black captives from South Africa. And they taught them a Dutch word called apartheid in the 1600s, while they were building New York City. New York City. Sojourner Truth was from New York. She spoke Dutch. She's often depicted as somebody with a southern accent. She was from here in New York. Bronx, a person named Bronk. It was a person named Bronk who had his plantation, all his black captives there where he was working to death. So the demographics in 1776 of the U.S. were much more diverse than they are now. The percentage of black people was much higher. And the overwhelming white majority was engineered with racist quotas until 1965. All these facts that you never hear about. You talk to too many young people. You should talk to older, educated people. Like people like me and Jerald, we're pushing 60. My dad, he's in his 80s. My dad will tell you about life in New York in the 50s and 60s. It was horrible. There's been massive progress. Horrible. The things my dad tells me, my dad left New York. He went back to the Caribbean. I was born in the Caribbean because it was, even as a mathematician and having far more opportunities here in the United States, he didn't want to stay here. He left. What's your question?
I was gonna say cause like my father was born in Jamaica as well. You know what I mean? So I always feel like, is there? Look at it this way: if you've never known freedom, people can hand you anything and tell you it's freedom.
True.
So is it a thing of we are trying to become more free in this country? We're trying to become people, or is this thing of like, are we trying to contribute to a system that, for all intents and purposes, has no desire to view you as a person? In terms of, we hear this rhetoric, we have these ideas, we have all these...
Slow down for a second. Remember what I told you about how undemocratic the system was built to be.
Yeah.
So in 1776, when the country was far more diverse than it is now, percentage of blacks, so like more than double what it is now, you had tremendous amounts of Native Americans and Latinos. They built a system to magnify the votes of the most racist white people. That's what the system was built to do. So the accurate feelings you're describing about the system, the extremely on, because that's what it was built to do. It's doing what it was designed to do. And worse now is that the internet is a vehicle for white supremacists from all over the world to jump in and deceive you, discourage you, and mislead you. You know, most people know. I'm sorry?
They're deceiving white people.
Yeah, like
No. We're their top targets.
But
We are their top targets.
White poor people have no business voting for Republican. It doesn't make any sense. And yet they think that this is because it's, I don't know if you've talked about class at all, but white poor people have no business supporting any of those policies. It is against their own best interest. They're the most fooled out of all of them.
It's true.
So you know, it's
You understand what I'm saying?
So Franz Fanon.
Let me just finish what I was about to say.
Okay,
As far as
I want to address that. That's a good point.
Let me just finish what I was saying before she stopped me.
No, that's okay. This is free flow now.
yeah.
We're jumping in. It's
Yeah.
MMA, yo.
I was about to say, your generation is under attack from foreign white supremacists. Most people know Putin hacked Hillary, released all his documents, DNC documents, and so forth. Most of them do not know that his disinformation, he had a disinformation campaign on social media that was primarily targeted against black people. Not poor white people, black people. And it continues to this day. And he has trolls right now in Moscow. It's whatever time it is in the morning, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever in the morning, they are pumping out misinformation to discourage black people from voting. That was Putin's number, and he did very well in 2016 with it. Didn't do as well in 2020, but he hasn't given up at all. And they are coming at us, number one. We are their number one targets, not poor white people. Yes.
What I'm saying is that the rhetoric of the Republican Party and their policies do not help poor white people.
Poor white people don't care. This is very
Right.
important. They
So-
don't care. They just don't care.
They're racist.
Yeah.
They-
So
that's not their priority.
all right, let's take.
Their priority
Yeah, we're
is
gonna come
not
back.
what they get. It's
Let's
what we
take him.
don't get.
Let's take the gentleman aside. We'll come
I
back.
just want to make one comment on that.
Give him my mic.
If you take your poorest white person and you can make them think that they're better
Come on.
than a black person,
They don't care about
you
it.
can pick their pocket.
They don't care about anything.
That's
their
their
whole
answer.
strategy.
That is it. That's
So-
what they're doing. Yes, ma'am.
All those people on
Yeah.
January 6th are literally, that is not in their best interest to do any of that.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Well, so I want to go back to your point, and that, real fast about Wow, we gotten far. I'm gonna go back to your point. I know what I want to say to your point because it connects. Oh yeah, like why do all this in this system? Like why be involved, or what to do because somebody can just sell you freedom if you sell you anything that's freedom if you never had it before. I would say, look at exactly what people are trying to do to prohibit your freedom as you see it. Look at all the ways they're trying to restrict it. And then you go against that grain.
But that stems from what she's saying.
No, I'm not getting to her yet. I'm talking about from your point. So for example, we have the Supreme Court case here that is dismantling voting rights. Why? Right? We have white folks who are voting, who have voted against Obamacare, who have said, I don't care if it helps me. I don't care how poor I am, as long as they don't get it. And I gave that analogy of the two mothers of an unborn child lying about whose child it is. And then Solomon said, well, let's cut it in half. And one mother said, yeah, let's cut it in half. Because if I'm not going to get it, nobody's going to get it. Yes, it's ideological.
We don't simply want these niggas to have it.
Exactly.
To the point that we'll make ourselves suffer.
Right.
We don't want niggas to have it.
But I wanted to take it to another step to the point of, yes, they're selling the same information to white folks. And there's this term, I love that Jones uses a lot. It's called willfully ignorant. Because unfortunately for them, and Boren and Langston Hughes wrote about this, is that they will prefer a psychocultural satisfaction over their financial or physical well-being. You know how some people are like, just to spite you, I would do this. That's a hatred there. This is why Dr. Carol Anderson wrote this book called White Rage. And it's not about the rage that you only see with these brutal acts of violence. She's really talking about this feeling, this sentiment that shows up even in the most Beckiest way.
And how do we get to the bottom of that? Because that's the root of the problem.
So King told us we're not going to, it's not about changing people's mind. It's getting to the mantle of power, and that is voting, that's legislation.
But the fucked up part of it is about changing people's minds. Because if you fundamentally just view a certain demographic of people as less than you, I don't know what, even if you don't become nothing in life, I don't know what your kids might be. Your kid might be the next senator. Your kid might be the next head of whatever. Your ideology is influencing the trajectory of this country. We
Right.
view it that way because we, as black, we have been conditioned to believe that our beliefs don't have no effect on anything. We can feel a way and fuck with you.
But see, this is the thing. But here's the thing. So that in a static world of no change, of a world where there's no time and no change, in a world where human beings are not only influence the environment, but also influence it, in a world where these things are absent, then I would get you. But that statement stretched into the fabric of history of black folks here being one of the only civilizations to overturn their captivity. Listen, Marcus Garvey said, and I understand why at this time, because he was alive during the upstart of Jim Crow, and he said to entertain the notion that someday a black person will reach the highest office in this nation is to entertain vain hope. Because he couldn't see it then. He was stuck in that time. Others have wrote that it is possible. Now, Garvey's apathy at the time is understandable. But when times have changed, there are people, the civil rights movement really started right after Reconstruction. We just locate the few years around, we shall overcome days and a couple of dogs barking at us, and that's what we see as civil rights. But the fight has been started since Black Wall Street, right? Since Mississippi, which is the home in the Reconstruction, which is the home of the first black senator, U.S. Senator Hiram Revel, which is the answer to the question I was going to ask y'all. But the point of all of this is that If you go back to see what we didn't have and what we now have, and what I really would encourage you, like I encourage people to read slave narratives, but I also encourage us to read the diaries and biographies of white racists of the KKK, how they lament the changes. This is not what I fought for my country, decade after decade. So Sun Tzu also, the Art of War, he also reminds us to understand our enemy that we're fighting. Because sometimes we are fighting on the wrong battleground with the wrong tools. And if we understand the sentiment, we understand what their aching points are, what their pressure points are, we can move better. We've hit many of the pressure points. Marcus Garvey had also said, one of the biggest mistakes that white folks realize is that they let us get a glimpse of that power at the polls. And they will fight tooth and nail to never let that happen again. And it's so true. After Hiram Revels became the first black senator, we had about 2 or 3 more. Maybe 2 more, actually. One more right after him. And then a couple of sprinkles. After almost 100 years, when Obama became, in 2004, Obama became the 5th black senator. That was the holdup. They put the choke on us in politics because they understood that and tried to dilute our understanding of that and discourage us from being in politics. To the point now, we are now saying, oh, nothing can never change. When they already saw the change happen.
I don't think that people in my demographic have a perspective of nothing can change. I think the perspective is we are disillusioned in terms of all of these things about like voter rights and so on and so forth they are important. But from my age group and my demographic, we come from the perspective of AO fans. We don't give a fuck about none of that. All of y'all perspectives and all of y'all systems and all of y'all ideas are flawed. We have no care for it. So if y'all want to do all of this, like say electoral college, like who majority, whatever, blah, 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 blah. It's like, from our perspective, we can literally just objectively view it and go, this shit is silly. Y'all niggas are engaging in shit that don't mean nothing.
It's absurd.
It's absurd. That's why we talk about nihilism.
Yes, but
It is absurd.
however, but check this out though. That is only true without context. We don't even, I bet your boys don't even live like that day to day. What they doing? They out there grinding, hustling. They're out there grinding and hustling. Even when people say start a business, don't vote. A business might not even, you need 5 years. And most businesses fail. So what I'm saying, so my point is that I hear you, and I agree with you with the disillusionment. But I think every time you have that conversation with yourself or whoever, just do an experiment. Put it in history. Not, just put it in historical context.
The grinding and hustling is a distraction. And that's what the older generation don't recognize. Y'all have been raised on the idea of the American dream. Here's what's to get it.
That's not
No, it's not true. No. Let me come in there right now. See, this is the thing. We've been I'm talking a lot, but as coming out that generation,
Yeah, that's not
we've been very clear about what the American dream is and isn't.
Yeah.
The younger generation has been more on the regular,
second.
and I do think it's disillusionment, as you're
Let me
saying.
talk to him for a second. Your knowledge base is very, very, very slim. It's very little. And you're not listening to people that know vastly more than you. And you're talking to us like you.
Well, he's just sharing.
we're
He's
on
sharing.
par.
No, he's sharing. Yeah. He's sharing his thing. Let's not take it to. No, you good.
Yeah, I'm not trying to delegitimize what y'all know.
No. Jones is ready to be an ancestor. He's coming at it like that. Don't worry.
Because I ain't gonna lie, everything that y'all are saying, I've been soaking it. It's information.
And likewise,
At the same time,
yeah.
I'm talking about something that me and my generation are literally living with. Y'all can have a perspective. Y'all can have an idea. Y'all can have an interpretation of what y'all think it is. We are literally living through it. So when you're talking about this is what this is what that is. We're talking to people that are fam. We look around and we be like, yo, what is the hope for anything? What is the acceptance of anything? Y'all talk about voter rights and vote all this stuff. We look around and go, yo, fam, every time I wake up, there's some new shit going on.
So let me.
There's
But here's the thing. To your point. I'm sorry to cut in, but to your point though, we got a few minutes. But I know that's the generation. I'm a part of that generation too. I produce hip hop. I hear the lyrics. I shoot videos. So my thing is, this is why we're doing this, because y'all living the ideas that were implanted for us to think like that.
But we're the
'Cause-
product of everything that y'all did. And that's the
No, we got that. That's why, so what we're saying is, I think, so the purpose of this panel is to throw out some seeds. The seeds that we haven't got to grow the gardens, to create more roses to break through the concrete. Right? So what we're saying is, we understand it's rough. Listen, I live right up the block. Harlem. I'm just, I'm not. But I'm talking about. But I want to go there to the rough, because I can arguably say this generation got it lighter than I had it. I remember if you look at a photo of Harlem in the '80s, it was nothing but rubble. Now you're talking about, and Jerald's talking about having access to knowledge. There was no access to knowledge. The only knowledge you need was to watch your back.
information is
So-
always a supplement. That's the thing. It's like
So what we're trying to say, all we're trying to say is this. With all respect, and it's not because I teach a lot. There's a circular argument here. And there's a circular one on our end that we can learn from too, to listen to what they're going through. But what we're trying to say is, yo, we hear you and you're right about your experience. However, here are some things to try. And here's a forum that you can come to articulate what you're feeling and share what you're learning. Because that is going to break the cycle. There's a habit of thought here. We got to solve a problem. So what I would love to end on is, you give me a challenge, because we're going to do, yo, Charles, we're going to do this again. Yo, Charles is the man. He let us do this right here. Thanks, Charles. I got to shout you out. Charles, can we do a part 2? You let us know? Because what I want to do is do a challenge. And we don't have to do it on the mic. We can talk, we'll wrap this up. You give me a concern, or whatever it is, a hard question, and I want to give you something. Because we're really about trying to find ways to build together. There's different ways to do it. I feel that it is getting access to more information to empower you, so that way your thoughts don't run wild with the only things that you've heard about black folks, with all that is negative.
Kasaun, I just want to.
So
It's not information, it's strategy.
that's what I'm saying. That is strategy.
But the information is like, okay, this is bad, it's built against us. What are we doing?
I want to.
So here's the thing. So when
To break the electoral.
so here's the thing. We wouldn't need to worry about the electoral college if our voter turnout was up, because it would change by virtue of the representatives we put in.
But see.
By virtue of that.
But voting in a system that don't even like niggas. What, like, and this is what my generation is trying to figure out. We're not saying that y'all are wrong. We are literally trying to come up with the answers. In terms of, if we exist in a system that you can vote, you can do all this, you can do all that. If we live in a system that fundamentally views niggas as
See, here's the thing. Here's the thing with that. I'm sorry, Joe, but here's the thing. So first of all, that term, I'm gonna let you go. I'm sorry. But I have to say this. A system is a network of phenomena and these phenomena are produced by physical beings. So what we're saying is, the point is, when you're missing the point of our activity in that. When you vote in somebody, or when you do something, forget politics. So politics is not limited just to electoral. It's how you move. Even doing this would have been actually, you go back 100 years, we'd all be shot up in here talking like this.
Would we know?
Right? Yes.
But look,
Yes. See, the fact that you asked that, listen, here's an anecdote for you. About in the 1950s, a black man he came back from the war, World War II, and said, I'm a hero, right? We won, I'm an American. He says, I'm gonna go vote. And they had a sign. And I'm gonna use the word nigger only in this case as it's biographical, as a white person talking about us, not as a black man talking to another brother. They said any nigga that come in here and vote, that'll be the last thing they do. This man walked in there and voted. And everybody, all his friends were like, oh, you crazy. He walked out saying, ain't nothing happened to me because I'm an American hero. He went home and they knocked on his door. A white guy walked on his door and spoke to the guy's mother. Can we see your son here, such and such? She says, she's thinking like maybe getting the medal. She says, oh, why, sure. I asked him to come out. He came out and they shot him dead. But that's they why? No. They shot this man dead for voting. For having a voice. Thank you. So my point is, when we talk about this system, it's not just some robot just happening. There are people who are preventing us from partaking in it. Now the game is crazy because it's not just physical no more. We actually won that game. However, the second game that we're in is that, like I told you, a meeting, white supremacist meeting. What do we do to get them not vote now? And the best thing we can do is to get them to not want to.
My question is, why do we keep asking these people?
We're not asking. We're not asking. That's the thing that people thought about Martin Luther King Jr. We're not asking.
See, that's going back.
Why do we keep wanting approval from these niggas?
Who's talking about approval? We're talking about living our lives. It's two different things.
No, I'm talking about in totality. Voting rights, being acknowledged as human, birth rights. Why do we keep asking?
We're past that. We're changing our environment. I feel that, to keep it real, I'm sorry I made this thing. To keep it real, this may be too real, but I'm gonna just say it. I feel like the people who really feel that negative about it, when we wanted to go to Africa, we couldn't escape. Oh, that was a fact. That's history.
But I'm saying.
No, I'm saying. I guess my point is, if you there are available black countries for any person right now to go to right now. So the question would be to you, why you're still here and not on the battleground?
Because we've been asking niggas for approval for how many years?
So you're giving up? Wait a minute, how many? You're only 26 years old.
Right.
You're only 26 years old, and all the rights you got was won for you by this generation.
We're talking about generational trauma.
No. We are talking about generational trauma, but guess what? You know, Dr. Joy DeGruy, who was the articulator of this concept about black generational trauma and how things that our generation, our parents went through, how they impact us negatively. Yeah, but if you're going to mention generational trauma, there's also this whole idea of generational inheritance. Have you taken inventory of your generational inheritance? And that's the work that I want to give you, and you give me work. Can we get last closing statements to everybody, and then we out?
I just want to make one statement. But, going back
Sorry, I'm sorry. I got it.
Going back to the 1965 Voters' Rights Bill, when you had King and LBJ, okay? My brother, hold on a minute. My brother, listen.
He gotta use the bathroom. If you get on the mic, he can hear you in the bathroom.
What happened when King was talking about passing the Voters' Rights Bill? What did LBJ say? Make me do it.
That's right. Thank you very much. That's a good one.
Martin Luther King said himself, I led my people into a burning building.
That's a misunderstanding. I'm glad you said that. Here's another thing about not knowing that history. You got to read this book.
Yeah,
You got to read his work, because this white world is using our own history and sound bites against us.
Yeah.
It making you think that he's like, oh my God, this guy is a brilliant man.
Yeah.
What King had finished one part of a war. He was a general. The South was a bastion for political power, and it was getting torn down from people lynching. He said we have to handle that first. A majority of our black folks are there. They can't even get to the polls. They're being lynched. Once we handle that, we're going to go into the North. Now, he was also he used rhetoric. And so he was galvanizing people, was expressing that this is going to be another uphill battle. People thinking that he meant that, oh my God, what have I done? He been wrote that this was only one phase. But what do we hear? Oh, he led us to a burning bush, so we need to give up. It's all a mistake. That is not true. You got to read his work word for word. Even what people are rearranging what X has said. about things. So, yes, that's it. And that's what goes back to Jones.
All right, you got to go to the bathroom.
And it goes back to Jones. It goes back to what Jones said, revisionist history.
Wait, hold on though, because I see that she's the only woman that's over here. She had a lot to say, but she kept on getting cut off.
Yes.
I really
Yep.
want to hear
Yep.
what she
Yeah, well, she has the mic, right?
she was saying something.
Oh, I was saying a lot of things. I was also listening to what the young man was saying, and I understand where he's coming from. These systems have been set up, as you have said, to work against it. They are designed perfectly to do what they're supposed to do. They have strategy behind them. What is our strategy? Instead of just highlighting what is wrong and faulty, what are we doing about it? We don't have to play nice. We can be as dirty as them. What are our tricks? What are our underhanded things? What are our behind the wall things? I was so disgusted that RBG did not have a successor. What was that about? How did we let that happen? That happened under Obama.
Not voting. That's the whole point we were saying.
But
We didn't show up in 2010, lost the House. We didn't show up in 2014,
But
lost the Senate.
How does that impact? Where's the strategy on that? Why didn't Obama say, okay, or why didn't she say, listen, we're gonna have a strategy about what we're doing.
Obama
with the,
talk about
Yes,
turnout.
he did. He
Obama
did.
said
So what happened?
He was
Obama
he was
kept
the
saying-
main one telling
Obama
us.
kept telling us vote in midterms.
Yep.
Obama kept saying we have a horrible habit of melting down in midterms.
And that's how they're going to get us. And that's what happened.
And Democrats staged a record meltdown in
hear it.
2010, staged another meltdown in 2014 and gave up the Senate. So
And
give
they
up the
also-
House in one, give up the Senate in the other.
Yeah, and they also put pressure on Ginsburg to retire at an earlier stage so Obama can
So what
nominate.
happened?
Okay, just in terms
We
of
just told you. We didn't
just in
show up
terms
before.
of a strategy.
Vote.
So you have
Yes.
long-term strategies and you have short-term strategies, but we do have to rethink the possibility of ending the
we probably gotta shut
electoral
down.
college.
We got
Right?
to do it.
I mean, whether or not whether we have another vote, or whether there's a will amongst the Democrats to end it.
I do not believe the Electoral College will be reformed by peace. It's like slavery. A lot of what's going on right now will not be reformed peacefully. So
So there's going to be a war?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And it's going to be started by the conservatives. The Confederates are going to do it again.
They actually want it. They
They
want to
started
cut
on
this
January
baby.
6th.
Like,
I mean,
They're
they've
very
already
aggressive.
went to the Capitol. I
Yes.
mean,
Right.
they-
Because-
it's happening.
yeah, because they see we're
Yep.
at the precipice of really changing this country. They're not wasting any time.
Yeah.
So they're ready. So as long as we're having this a certain mindset, they want to beat us to the punch. This is what we're talking about, not counting our inventory.
Right.
They're not playing games.
And I'm not against voting. I'm absolutely for voting. That's not what I'm saying.
yeah, I'm
What
gonna
I'm just
say.
saying we just have to be more strategic than what we
But
are
a lot
doing.
of us are
It's
against-
not just voting. It's not just voting.
No,
It's
it's
figuring
never.
out
It's never just voting. We're
it's
just talking
never-
about it here. Voting is actually a hub of a lot of things.
Right.
Because when you vote, it aligns with what you work, what you do, what you want, where you want your kid to go to school, what food you want access to in your community. You're gonna make those choices business-wise. So voting is important. And I throw this one. You all know Maurice Ashley, right? So my former chess coach, he was telling me about how Occupy Wall Street hit, and people were protesting, the real changers. And he had this meeting, and shared with me what kind of went on with this meeting. And another friend actually had a similar meeting with someone else, and they both said the same thing. So they're with the 1%, and the 1% literally laugh at the people saying, the Occupy Wall Street group. They're not afraid of them because they're saying those are the same people buying our products. Like when they leave here, we see stock go up. That doesn't change us because we're keeping an eye on lobbying on who gets in Senate and in the House. We're putting our money, like the Koch brothers, $1 billion on stopping them for voting. Not even stopping them, making them not want to vote. So the Occupy Wall Street has something to think about too. You can yell all you want, but what does that do to impact the system?
Yeah.
And we need to find what our pressure points are. Now, if they were real like King, you want to impact it with a march and not buy in certain places consistently, not get on a bus consistently. But are we really ready for that? Because a lot of us gonna go on Instagram later just to see what's going on, right?
You see, with that, we have a lot of power. We have more power. We don't even realize we have power.
Yeah.
You're right. They don't want us to know that.
We have power.
But other people
We can-
know we
we
have
can-
power, and they keep taking it away.
We're gonna have to
they
continue
threw out
this.
the Voting Rights Act.
We can continue this. I just got to shut down. I want to thank everybody for the first rugged Political Soul Food Forum. We can continue the talk. I just got to shut down. Can we give a hand to Charles really quickly? I want to let you know I want to thank the whole team. We got Lou here on sound and production managing. We got Kamal here doing production assistance. Dante, we got Dante in the back on cams and Steph on cams. I want to thank the whole Hollywood Studios team. But Charles, I want to say this before I leave. I was talking to Habiba. She's because you're kicking us out, bro. No, we're gonna shut down. We're gonna shut down the.
We're gonna have discourse afterwards.
Oh, word? Yeah. I bet. So I was talking to Habiba. Habiba's a designer, set designer, fashion designer, all kinds of design, interior design. Habiba, I told you she was here the other day. So let me tell you this though. So I brainstormed this idea with Habiba of starting this up, and I needed to call Charles to see if I can get in here. I accidentally called you on 4th of July. So if you guys saw a call from me, it was me. My bad. I was too eager to do this. So the day after I called him, he picked up. This is really important. I said, listen, I got this idea. I want to do this event. He didn't even hear me out. He says if it's something positive for the community that can galvanize us, do something, think positive, then he was in. That's what it's all about. Because it brought all of us together. All right. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and have a great night. We're going to continue this after hours, y'all.
Definitely.